Look at the zone of inhibition here on the E. coli.
Yeah.
It's significant.
Yes, the garlic extract is showing strong antimicrobial effects across the board.
Imagine waking up in a world where the most basic infection could be your last. No pills, no prescriptions, no pharmacies on every corner. For most of human history, that was reality. Yet somehow, civilization survived. Thrived even. They had something we've forgotten, something so common, so ordinary, that it sits in your kitchen right now, completely ignored by the medical establishment that claims to have all the answers. What if I told you that before penicillin revolutionized medicine in 1928, there existed a botanical compound so powerful that soldiers carried it into battle, surgeons packed wounds with it, and entire communities relied on it to survive plagues that decimated populations? What if that same compound still exists today, scientifically proven to fight bacteria, fungi, and even antibiotic-resistant superbugs? Yet your doctor will never write you a prescription for it. This isn't about folk medicine or grandma's remedies. This is about peer-reviewed research, laboratory evidence, and a medical mystery that touches every single one of us. Because somewhere between ancient wisdom and modern pharmaceuticals, we lost something crucial. And the cost of that loss is measured in lives, in suffering, and in a healthcare system that has forgotten how to look beyond the prescription pad. The year is 1858. French microbiologist Louis Pasteur sits in his laboratory, hunched over a microscope, observing something extraordinary.
Look at the zone of inhibition
He's placed
here on the E.
bacterial
coli. It's
cultures
significant.
in proximity
Yes, the garlic
to
extract
crushed
is showing
garlic
strong
cloves.
antimicrobial
Within
effects
hours,
across the board.
the bacteria begin to die. Pasteur documents this phenomenon meticulously, noting that whatever compound emanates from this humble bulb possesses remarkable antimicrobial properties. He doesn't fully understand the mechanism. That discovery would take another century. But he witnesses the effect with his own eyes. Bacteria that were thriving minutes earlier are now struggling, their cellular structures compromised by something invisible yet undeniably lethal. Fast forward to World War I. Battlefields across Europe become theaters of horror, not just from bullets and bombs, but from infected wounds that kill more soldiers than combat itself. Antibiotics don't exist yet. Surgeons face an impossible choice: amputate or watch gangrene spread. But some field doctors, particularly in Russia and Britain, begin employing an ancient strategy. They pack wounds with garlic paste. They create poultices infused with garlic juice. They observe, to their astonishment, that soldiers treated with these preparations show dramatically reduced infection rates. The practice becomes so widespread that garlic earns a nickname among medics: Russian penicillin. These weren't superstitious practitioners dabbling in herbalism. These were trained physicians watching their patients survive against odds that should have killed them, and they documented everything. Now, you might be thinking this sounds like historical curiosity, interesting, but irrelevant to our modern world of advanced medicine. Except, here's where the story takes a disturbing turn, because when scientists finally developed the technology to analyze garlic at the molecular level, what they discovered didn't disprove those historical observations. It confirmed them, spectacularly. The compound responsible is called allicin. When a garlic clove is crushed or cut, an enzyme called alliinase converts allicin into allicin, a sulfur-containing molecule with devastating effects on microbial life. Research published in the journal Microbios demonstrated that allicin disrupts bacterial cell membranes, causing them to leak their contents and collapse. Studies in applied microbiology and biotechnology showed it interferes with essential enzyme systems that bacteria need to replicate. Work from Loma Linda University revealed that allicin can penetrate biofilms, those protective layers bacteria create to shield themselves from antibiotics, and kill the organisms hiding beneath. Perhaps most remarkable, research from Washington State University found that diallyl sulfide, another garlic compound, proved 100 times more effective than 2 common antibiotics at fighting Campylobacter, a bacterium responsible for millions of food poisoning cases annually, 100 times. Not marginally better, not slightly more effective, 100 times. Let that sink in for a moment. But the evidence doesn't stop at bacteria. Research from the Pasteur Institute, ironically the institution bearing the name of that early garlic researcher, demonstrated antifungal activity against Candida species, the fungi responsible for thrush and systemic infections in immunocompromised patients. Studies from Japan showed effectiveness against parasitic infections. Chinese research documented antiviral properties against influenza strains. The scientific literature isn't sparse or questionable. It's robust, repeated, and remarkably consistent across decades and continents. So here's the question that should haunt anyone paying attention. Why doesn't your doctor prescribe it? The answer isn't medical. It's economic, regulatory, and systemic. Here's something most people don't realize about modern medicine. For a treatment to become official, it must navigate a regulatory pathway designed exclusively for patentable compounds. In the United States, getting FDA approval for a new drug costs between $500 million and $2 billion. That process requires multiple phases of clinical trials, extensive documentation, years of review, and armies of lawyers and scientists. No pharmaceutical company will invest that money unless they can patent the final product and recoup their investment through exclusive market control. You cannot patent garlic. It's a plant. It grows wild. Anyone can cultivate it. There's no mechanism for a company to claim ownership over allicin or any other naturally occurring compound within it, which means there's no financial incentive to pursue the regulatory approval that would legitimize garlic as medicine. This creates a profound irony. We have substances with documented antimicrobial properties supported by scientific research, proven safe through millennia of human consumption, yet they remain classified as food. Legally prohibited from being marketed with medical claims, excluded from treatment guidelines, and absent from medical education. Before we go further, if you're finding this information valuable, consider subscribing to this channel. We investigate the gaps in conventional medical knowledge, the effective solutions that exist outside mainstream awareness. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Now, let's examine specific research that makes garlic's exclusion from medicine even more puzzling. In 1999, researchers at the University of Ottawa published a study examining garlic extract against methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA, the antibiotic-resistant superbug that kills thousands annually. The garlic extract demonstrated significant bactericidal activity. A 2005 study from Pasteur University found that aged garlic extract reduced the severity of cold and flu symptoms while decreasing the number of days participants felt sick. Research from the University of Alabama showed that hydrogen sulfide, produced when the body metabolizes garlic compounds, dilates blood vessels and improves circulation, explaining historical uses for cardiovascular conditions. But perhaps most compelling, studies examining garlic consumption in populations. Research tracking communities with high dietary garlic intake consistently shows lower rates of certain infections and reduced antibiotic usage. This isn't controlled clinical trial data, but it's epidemiological evidence suggesting real-world impact. The medical establishment's response? Silence, mostly, or dismissal. More research needed. Insufficient evidence for clinical recommendations. There are concerns about standardization. That last point deserves scrutiny. Yes, garlic's potency varies based on variety, growing conditions, processing, and preparation. Fresh crushed garlic produces more olechin than cooked garlic. Aged garlic extract contains different compounds than raw bulbs. This variability makes some physicians uncomfortable. They prefer the consistency of pharmaceutical drugs, where every pill contains identical dosages of identical compounds. But here's what that argument ignores. For centuries, healers managed this variability successfully. They understood that fresh preparations worked better than dried. They knew crushing activated the compounds. They developed techniques to maximize potency. The knowledge existed. It still exists. We've simply decided it's too complicated compared to writing a prescription. And there's another factor rarely discussed openly: institutional momentum. Medical schools train doctors to think in terms of pharmaceutical interventions. Residents learn to prescribe drugs from an approved formulary. Insurance companies reimburse for FDA-approved medications. Hospital protocols specify particular antibiotics for particular infections. The entire infrastructure of modern healthcare flows toward patented compounds distributed through regulated channels. Suggesting a doctor recommend garlic instead of amoxicillin isn't just asking them to consider an alternative treatment. It's asking them to operate outside the system that licenses them, that pays them, that defines their professional identity. It's asking them to take legal and professional risk for a substance they weren't trained to use, that can't be standardized to their satisfaction, and that won't generate revenue for anyone in the medical industrial complex. So garlic remains in your kitchen, and infections remain a pharmaceutical domain. But let's be clear about something important. This isn't an argument against antibiotics. Modern antibiotics save lives. They transformed medicine from a palliative art into a healing science. When you have bacterial meningitis or sepsis or pneumonia, you need powerful pharmaceutical intervention. No one should die from a treatable infection because they chose garlic over ciprofloxacin. The question isn't whether antibiotics work. The question is, could garlic and similar antimicrobial plants play a role alongside conventional medicine? Could they reduce our dependence on antibiotics, thereby slowing the development of antibiotic resistance? Could they provide options for minor infections that don't require pharmaceutical intervention? Could they serve as preventive measures in populations with limited healthcare access? The research suggests yes. The medical system says no, not because the science is lacking, but because the infrastructure to integrate such treatments doesn't exist. Now, here's something practical you can understand and potentially apply. Research indicates that crushing or chopping fresh garlic and allowing it to sit for 10 minutes before consuming or cooking activates maximum allicin production. The enzyme reaction requires time. Swallowing whole cloves or using pre-minced garlic doesn't produce the same effect. Heat degrades allicin, so adding garlic at the end of cooking preserves more of its bioactive compounds. For those interested in antimicrobial properties specifically, studies have used dosages ranging from 1 to 3 fresh cloves daily. Aged garlic extract supplements, which contain different but related compounds, have been studied at doses from 600 to 1200 milligrams daily. These aren't medical recommendations. Remember, no doctor can legally prescribe garlic, but they represent the ranges investigated in research contexts. Some individuals experience digestive discomfort with raw garlic. Others notice body odor. Garlic can interact with blood-thinning medications and should be avoided before surgery. These aren't trivial considerations. But they're also not more severe than the side effects of many antibiotics: allergic reactions, gut microbiome disruption, antibiotic-associated diarrhea, liver toxicity. Every intervention carries risk. The question is whether the risks are proportionate to the benefits and whether we're evaluating natural and pharmaceutical options with the same standards. Here's where the story gets even more interesting. Garlic isn't alone. Honey, particularly medical-grade Manuka honey, demonstrates documented antibacterial properties and has been used clinically for wound treatment in some hospitals. Oregano oil contains carvacrol, shown in laboratory studies to disrupt bacterial membranes. Echinacea, dismissed for decades, has recent research supporting immune-modulating effects. Berberine, from various plants, shows antimicrobial and metabolic effects comparable to metformin in some studies. The pattern repeats: documented biological activity, historical use, scientific investigation, regulatory limbo. This represents a systematic blind spot in modern medicine. We've constructed a healthcare system that excels at managing acute crises with powerful interventions, but struggles to integrate low-cost, widely available, prevention-oriented approaches that don't fit the pharmaceutical model. And the consequences extend beyond individual health. Antibiotic resistance now kills over 1 million people annually worldwide. The WHO considers it one of the top 10 global health threats. Every time we use antibiotics unnecessarily for viral infections where they don't work, for minor bacterial infections that might resolve naturally, for conditions where alternatives might suffice, we accelerate resistance development. Bacteria evolve rapidly. They share resistance genes horizontally across species. We're approaching a post-antibiotic era where common infections become untreatable. Yet we largely ignore compounds that bacteria haven't evolved resistance to, precisely because bacteria encountered them throughout evolutionary history. Garlic has been used medicinally for 5,000 years. Bacteria have had 5,000 years to develop resistance. Some strains show reduced susceptibility, but widespread resistance hasn't emerged the way it has with antibiotics used for mere decades. Why? Likely because garlic attacks multiple cellular targets simultaneously. Antibiotics typically disrupt one specific bacterial mechanism. Bacteria can mutate that single target and gain resistance. Garlic's multiple sulfur compounds attack membranes, enzymes, and replication systems concurrently. Evolving resistance to all of them simultaneously is far more difficult. This suggests a role for antimicrobial plants, not as replacements for antibiotics, but as complementary tools that might extend the useful lifespan of our pharmaceutical arsenal. If you're still with me, exploring these hidden corners of medical knowledge, subscribe to stay informed about topics that challenge conventional thinking with scientific rigor. Click that subscribe button. It helps this content reach others who need to see it. The story of garlic in medicine isn't really about garlic. It's about how knowledge gets validated, who decides what counts as evidence and what gets lost when economic structures determine medical practice. Consider, when pharmaceutical companies develop new antibiotics, they don't need to prove those antibiotics are better than all existing alternatives. They need to prove they're better than placebo and safe at therapeutic doses. That's the regulatory standard. Yet when researchers investigate garlic, the implicit standard becomes prove it's as good as the best existing antibiotic, explain its complete mechanism of action, standardize its active compounds, and do all of this without the funding pharmaceutical companies command. The double standard is built into the system. There's also a psychological component. Modern medicine has cultivated an image of sophistication and precision. Pills manufactured in gleaming facilities feel more legitimate than plants grown in dirt. Compounds with complex chemical names sound more credible than crush a garlic clove. We've learned to trust the industrial over the natural, the complex over the simple, the expensive over the free. But nature doesn't care about our preferences. Molecules work because of their structure and properties, not because of how we acquire them. Allicin disrupts bacterial membranes, whether it's extracted in a laboratory or released from a crushed clove in your kitchen. The mechanism is identical. What we're really discussing is authority. Who has the power to declare something medicine, and what interests that authority serves? Throughout history, healing knowledge was distributed. Families maintained herbal traditions. Communities had healers who understood local plants. Knowledge passed through generations, tested by results, refined by experience. That system had limitations, no doubt. Trial and error caused harm. Superstition mixed with efficacy. Serious conditions went untreated. but professionalization and centralization of medicine, while bringing tremendous benefits, also created dependence. We've outsourced our understanding of healing entirely to experts and institutions. We've forgotten that our bodies evolved alongside plants, that our immune systems developed in environments rich with antimicrobial compounds from food, that our ancestors survived without pharmacies. Garlic represents what we lost in that exchange: accessible, affordable, empowering health tools that don't require prescriptions or specialists. None of this suggests rejecting modern medicine. It suggests expanding it. It suggests recognizing that not all valuable interventions emerge from pharmaceutical pipelines. It suggests rebuilding connections to traditional knowledge while subjecting it to scientific scrutiny. It suggests asking why our healthcare system excludes effective approaches simply because they're not profitable. We stand at a peculiar moment in history. We have more scientific knowledge about medicinal plants than ever before. We can identify active compounds, understand mechanisms, conduct rigorous studies, yet we use this knowledge less in clinical practice than societies did centuries ago, armed only with observation and experience. The medical establishment argues this is progress, that we've moved beyond crude herbalism to precise pharmaceutical science. But when bacterial resistance threatens to render antibiotics useless, when healthcare costs crush families, when people die from infections we once defeated with plants, perhaps we need to reconsider what progress actually means. Garlic won't solve all these problems. No single plant will. But it represents a proof of concept. Nature provides antimicrobial compounds. We can validate them scientifically, and we've chosen to ignore them anyway. That choice reveals more about our healthcare system than about garlic. In researching this topic, I spoke with a physician who uses herbal antimicrobials in his practice, despite professional pressure to stick to conventional prescribing. He described the regulatory absurdity. I can write a prescription for an antibiotic that will cost my patient $200, disrupt their gut microbiome for months, and potentially contribute to antibiotic resistance. But if I suggest they try garlic first for their mild respiratory infection, I risk being seen as unprofessional. The system rewards expensive intervention and punishes conservative natural approaches. That incentive structure permeates medicine. Doctors face malpractice concerns if they deviate from standard protocols. Hospitals profit from pharmaceutical contracts. Insurance companies negotiate drug prices but don't reimburse for dietary recommendations. Research funding flows predominantly toward patentable compounds. Medical journals, partially funded by pharmaceutical advertising, prioritize drug studies over natural product research. Every component of the system pushes the same direction, toward pharmaceutical solutions and away from alternatives, regardless of their merit. Breaking this pattern requires more than individual choice. It requires regulatory reform, research funding reallocation, medical education transformation, and cultural shift in how we think about health and healing. But it also requires something simpler: asking questions. Why is this effective treatment not prescribed? Who benefits from its exclusion? What would change if it were integrated into standard care? Those questions threaten established interests. They expose uncomfortable truths about how medical decisions are made. They reveal that evidence-based medicine sometimes means evidence we've chosen to generate and acknowledge, while other evidence languishes unexplored because no one profits from exploring it. Garlic is still in your kitchen. It still contains a lichen. That compound still disrupts bacterial membranes, still demonstrates antimicrobial activity in petri dishes and sometimes in human bodies. None of that has changed. What changed is our willingness to acknowledge it, our ability to prescribe it, our cultural validation of it as medicine. And that's entirely a human construction. We built these barriers. We can dismantle them. The question is whether we'll expand our definition of evidence-based medicine to include rigorously studied natural compounds, whether we'll create regulatory pathways for non-patentable treatments, whether we'll train doctors to integrate botanical and pharmaceutical knowledge, whether we'll restructure healthcare economics to reward outcomes rather than interventions. Those changes seem distant, but they begin with awareness, with understanding that effective treatments exist outside the pharmacy, with recognizing the gap between what science knows and what medicine practices, with asking why that gap persists and who benefits from maintaining it. This isn't about rejecting modern medicine. It's about fulfilling its promise, using every tool science validates to improve human health, regardless of whether those tools generate profit. Garlic challenges us to imagine a healthcare system built on healing rather than commerce, where doctors prescribe what works, not what pays, where patients access affordable interventions without corporate middlemen, where traditional knowledge and modern science collaborate rather than compete. That system doesn't exist yet, but understanding why, understanding the forces that exclude simple, effective, ancient remedies from modern care, is the first step toward creating it. The next time you crush a garlic clove for cooking, remember, you're releasing the same compound that fascinated Pasteur, saved soldiers in wartime, and continues to demonstrate antimicrobial activity in research laboratories worldwide. You're handling medicine that works, scientifically validated, yet officially ignored, and maybe, armed with that knowledge, you'll start asking why.